Welcome back. As we continue talking about mental health, I have with me Scott Doniger. Scott, you are a chronic stress counselor.
Yes.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
So I help people who are, for lack of a better term, kind of stuck in a state of anxiety or stress that in many cases actually winds up manifesting in some kind of illness that they can't get rid of. So people who are living day to day and they know that they're unhappy, they know that they are searching for some answers inside of themselves. And in many cases, they can feel the stress or anxiety in their bodies, but they haven't been able to either find someone else to work with who's helped them navigate through a state of chronic stress, this is the first time in their lives they've encountered a moment in time that doesn't end. So they're just not feeling well. They're not happy, and it's become a chronic state that they've been living in.
I'd like to ask you about your story because
Sure.
you told me that you were living in a state of stress. You've been a successful businessman, you've had startups, you've had many careers in your life, and you were just living in stress and you were experiencing what was like a mystery illness. You didn't know what it
That's
was.
right.
And then eventually you realized it was chronic fatigue syndrome. Walk
Correct.
us through this story.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with a piece of data. The Center for the CDC, in 2018 or beginning of 2019, did a survey of how many people were officially in the United States diagnosed as having chronic fatigue syndrome. And back in 2019, it was about 1.8 million people. So a lot of people, but in comparison to the amount of people in the United States, a small number. Well, they just did another research study and posted the results this past December, and it's
Is
so I help people who are.
you've had startups, you've had many careers in your life, and you were just living in stress and you were experiencing what was like a mystery illness. You didn't know what it
That's
was.
right.
And then eventually you realized it was chronic fatigue syndrome.
Correct.
Walk us through this story.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with a piece of data. The Center for the CDC, in 2018 or beginning of 2019, did a survey of how many people were officially in the United States diagnosed as having chronic fatigue syndrome. And back in 2019, it was about 1.8 million people. So a lot of people, but in comparison to the amount of people in the United States, a small number. Well, they just did another research study and posted the results this past December, and it's now 3.3 million people. It's almost a doubling in 3 years. And that is outside of the potential effects of what we went through with COVID. The reason I bring this up is because many of us are living in a state of chronic fatigue, but it has not been diagnosed because so many doctors don't really even understand what chronic fatigue syndrome is. As it turned out in my life, I would never have described myself as living in a state of chronic stress, but that's exactly what it turned out to be. And in about 2017, I became ill, didn't know what it was. I went to any number of doctors, from acupuncturists to my general practitioner to neurologists to thyroid specialists to gut and digestive system dysfunction specialists. No one could make me feel better. And as it turned out, the solution and the path back to wellness had more to do with what was happening above my neck as it did what was happening below my neck. I found a wonderful integrative specialist when I moved to Boulder in 2017, and she brought my biophysical health back to normal states. But had I not found a counselor who introduced me to parts work, it's actually the correct terminology is called internal family systems, but in regular terms, we call it parts work. It was parts work, which is a therapeutic mental health approach that really got my health back, because what I realized was it was parts of me that were actually carrying so much stress for so many years of my life. And over time, if we don't heal those parts of us, they may get us sick. We would never have thought of it that way. But if we don't help these parts heal, the parts actually can produce and cause illness in the body because they're carrying so much toxic energy from us being in a state of stress or anxiety.
So parts work, as I understand it, is part of internal family systems.
Correct.
that was coined by Dr. Schwartz, correct?
Exactly, Dr. Richard Schwartz.
And how would you describe it? I mean, some people hear it and they're like, oh, does that mean I have multiple personalities? Who are these parts? But apparently we all have these parts, like our inner child and different parts. Explain to us what that is.
Yeah, Vijay, I'm glad you brought it up that way. So there are two really interesting pieces of parts work that I will start out with. People have been writing about different parts of our personalities since the beginning of time. Socrates wrote about parts of us. Shakespeare wrote about different parts of us. And now I would even ask your audience, think about when you're talking with friends and family, many of us actually say this in our lives. Well, there's a part of me that's upset about this. There's a part of me that's happy about this. It is not an epiphany to understand that our inner world is comprised of different parts of us. Most of these parts actually begin formulating when we're young. So it might be a part of us that becomes really shy in school because we feel judged or criticized by other people. So there's a part of us that makes us hide and not be as public as we might otherwise be. There's a part of us that has become like a hider part of us.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I have, my part is, I have this protector part, as a mom.
Exactly.
So if anyone messes with my kids, this part
exactly
comes
right.
out of me, this mama bear protector.
That's exactly
so
right.
we all have these different parts. And tell me how parts work helped you.
The real epiphany in parts work is not necessarily that we have many parts to us. The real epiphany and the magic about parts work is that also in our inner worlds is our self. And that's self with a capital S. The Buddhists would call that our essence. There are other spiritual approaches that have their words. But the self is born with us. It cannot be damaged. The self does not pathologize any of us. Our inner parts and our inner worlds are not addictive. These are all adaptations to the way we've grown up for all intents and purposes. And the self becomes the agent for healing. And so that's the segue to my own journey. When I discovered parts work, I discovered that there was a part of me that I probably had always known was inside of me, but I didn't understand how powerful a role it had played. All of the stress and anxiety through my childhood and my adolescence and even in my early adult years, there was a part of me that I just became familiar with, and I called it the suppressor. Not unlike a lot of people that we know, I kept all of my energy inside of me. I rarely voiced anger or displeasure or anything that my inner world needed to get out. So this suppressor just kept me safe by keeping my voice quiet. Over time, that produces a tremendous amount of toxic energy in the system. As it turned out in my journey through chronic fatigue, I was actually explaining this to you, I had to go see a neurologist because I couldn't understand why I had such horrible head fog and such fatigue from the head fog. And my neurologist, one of the world's leading migraine specialists at Stanford University, who's associated with the Stanford Clinic of Chronic Fatigue, said to me that my amygdala, which should have been the size of an almond, was about the size of a golf ball. And so what he said to me was, he said, look, we can get you healthy, just like my integrative specialist in Boulder, but the work is going to be bringing you out of a state of chronic anxiety and chronic stress. And that will be the agent for healing for chronic fatigue. Parts work helped me understand how to access the energy of self, which is encapsulated in 8 words that all happen to begin with the letter C. Curiosity, calmness, clarity, confidence, connectedness, creativity. I think that's 8. I might be missing one. If we can access that energy, and all of us have accessed that energy from time to time, we kind of know it when we're in it. When you're talking with someone and it's just a beautiful, calm flow between them. And you can become that wise self that you know is always there. But so often, a part of us gets triggered by something that happens in our lives, something that someone said. Just think of that Thanksgiving dinner table when the person across from you or next to you says the thing and it all spirals and everybody gets hijacked by a part of them that got triggered. If we can access self-energy, that is what can bring us back to a state of calmness. And that state of calmness is not just an emotional state. It's a biophysical state where our bodies do not secrete more of the neurotransmitters that can become toxic, or the hormones that can become toxic, or the stomach acid that can become toxic. So if we can bring ourselves back into a state of calm and curiosity and self-energy, our bodies respond and we don't get as sick. The illnesses that can be caused by living in a state of chronic stress, which range from autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, irritable bowel, migraine headaches, skin rashes, all of these may be caused by parts of us that are simply becoming burned out and have not been healed, and they're not releasing the energy that they need to release.
So do you think our medical system has caught up to this theory that our emotions are connected to our physical health?
It's a wonderful question. In some cases, yes, there are many leading indicators. The doctor that I found in Boulder who brought my biophysical health back, her name was Nicole Silver at Boulder Peak Health, and she is a University of San Francisco trained, Western medical trained integrative specialist, but her philosophy, her approach to helping people heal includes the connection between our emotional state and our physical state. She has not been trained in emotional regulation. That's the role of people like me and other therapists who've been trained. The medical profession is lagging behind for certain. The good news, though, is that we're having discussions like this, and that's why this is so important for all of the audience out there. It's okay now for us to begin to talk about mental illness and states of anxiety in ways that we never did. The bad news is that we've actually lost the narrative on what these terms actually mean. The New York Times ran a really interesting article this past week with a beautiful visual or video segment on it. And what they called out is this incredible phenomenon that's taking place mostly in TikTok and Instagram about what's called high-functioning anxiety. Well, high-functioning anxiety is not even a thing. It's a hashtag. But there are hundreds of millions of videos and related posts related to high-functioning anxiety, and that isn't even a thing. So we don't really even know what the word anxiousness means. There's nothing wrong with having feelings, nothing wrong with having emotions, but we're beginning to pathologize them. Parts work does not pathologize anything.
Wow.
It is a way to, just one final thing, it's a way to understand what's happening in our inner worlds, which so many other approaches just don't address.
Wow. Well, you brought up a really good point. A lot of people are getting their information, or should I say misinformation, from TikTok
right.
about mental health.
That's right.
Yeah, and in many ways, it's the social media, it's the society we live in, it's the culture that is contributing to what is causing us the anxiety and the depression. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? What services do you offer? Do you do parts work with people?
Yeah, parts work is at the core of my approach, and I appreciate you asking me. I have a website, www.scottdoniger.com, very, very easy to remember. Parts work is at the core of my approach. There are some other approaches and other modalities that I bring in. So all of the work that people do on meditation and somatics and sound healing and cold plunges, all of these things are really good, and many of them can be extremely therapeutic when coupled with something like parts work. Parts work is helping a person understand what's happening from the inside out, in their inner world, at the root cause of the things that might be driving anxiety and stress. All of these other approaches can be extremely helpful in the moment. So if someone can begin a meditation practice or a journaling practice every morning, that is going to help regulate their system as the day goes, regardless of what happens. So the work I do is anchored in parts work. For people who have already been diagnosed with complex PTSD, there's an approach that I've also been trained in called components-based psychotherapy, CPB. And it's a beautiful approach for helping people who are acutely diagnosed with PTSD in a complex way. Parts work is actually part of that therapeutic modality. So parts work is the through line to the work that I bring to people, and it is manifestly the most innovative. Having lived through analysts who specialized in Freudian analysis or Jungian analysis, and having that experience, parts work is by far the most innovative and the most effective approach that I've ever come across.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for the important work that you do, and you've helped so many people, and it was great talking to you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Good morning, Vail.